Welcome back. Please take your seats. Welcome back to the closing session of the International Summit on the Teaching Profession 2023. And now we come to the place where each country puts on the table the commitments that they plan to work on over the next year that came out of the discussions over the last 2.5 days. So we will have a PowerPoint presentation that includes each country's commitments. We will ask each of you to speak quickly. We're asking you to speak for 90 seconds or less. With 22 countries around the table, that adds up to quite a bit. So please, if at all possible, please keep your intervention short and crisp and to the point. So let's move on. We are going in alphabetical order except for one exception. We have moved Spain to be first because they need to leave, and then we'll go back to the regular alphabetical order. So Spain, you're going to set the standard, 90 seconds. Thank you.
Thank you. I will speak in Spanish. Bueno, la primera es ofrecer una profesión docente atractiva que esté reconocida socialmente y que prepare muy bien al docente para los retos que están preparándose. Y, desde luego, hay que establecer un marco de competencias profesionales docentes que nos sirvan como referencia para la carrera profesional docente. En segundo lugar, queremos promover el uso de las tecnologías digitales de forma que se dote a todo el profesorado de la formación y de los recursos necesarios, de forma que todo el alumnado, todos, puedan adquirir la competencia digital que queremos y reducir la brecha digital. Y, por último, en tercer lugar, desarrollar los valores de equidad, inclusividad, democracia y sostenibilidad en toda la comunidad educativa, incluyendo padres y madres, alumnado, profesorado, y que se pueda coordinar, evidentemente, con todos los sindicatos y entidades municipales. Gracias.
Thank you, Spain. That was fabulous. Everybody else, you have a standard to live up to. Next is Australia. Welcome.
Thank you, Maureen, and thank you for everything that you've done over the last few days to make this an exceptional conference, and to you, Secretary Cardona, as well, for making us feel so very, very welcome. I was in India a couple of weeks ago, met with the Education Minister there, and he described his job as being the mother portfolio, the portfolio from which everything else happens. And in India, there are 250 million students at school and 10 million teachers. And the lesson for me is that even though we are countries with different size education systems, our challenges are often very, very similar. And you see that in the proposals we have on the screen for Australia. The challenges of tackling workforce shortages, challenge of tackling and responding to the opportunities that artificial intelligence provides, as well as the important issues associated with mental health and well-being, not just of students, but of teachers. The implementation of our workforce plan, the development of an AI framework, and next steps in Australia to make sure we better support children and teachers with mental health and well-being. And I'm looking forward to reporting on action when we meet again in a year's time in Singapore.
Thank you very much, Australia, and we look forward to hearing next year. Austria?
Ich möchte mich ganz herzlich bedanken für die letzten Tage. Österreich hat sich sehr wohl hier gefühlt und die Diskussionen waren sehr spannend. Österreich hat seit letztem Jahr eine Initiative gestartet, Klasse Job. Wir wollen hier vor allem an einem modernen Berufsbild, einem modernen Berufsleitbild für Lehrerinnen und Lehrer arbeiten. Wir wollen damit, dass der Wert in der Gesellschaft für Lehrerinnen und Lehrer steigt, dass sie Schule aktiv mitgestalten und die Qualitätsentwicklung an Schulen aktiv vorantreiben. Digitalisierung. Österreich hat im vergangenen Jahr in der Sekundarstufe 1 einen neuen Unterrichtsgegenstand ins Leben gerufen, digitale Grundbildung. Hier braucht es gut ausgebildete Lehrerinnen und Lehrer. Gemeinsam mit pädagogischen Hochschulen und Universitäten wollen wir die Personalentwicklung vorantreiben und darauf achten, dass Lehrerinnen in ihren Kompetenzen und vor allem in ihren digitalen Kompetenzen bestmöglichst gestärkt werden. Und der dritte und letzte Punkt. Österreich plant eine Restrukturierung der Curricula für die Lehramtsausbildung. Wir haben derzeit 4 Jahre Bachelor, wir wollen verkürzen auf 3 Jahre und diese Gelegenheit auch nutzen, hier neue Inhalte in die Curricula bringen. Danke.
Thank you, Austria. Next is Canada.
Thank you, Maureen, and thank you, Secretary Cardona, for your hospitality. Feel very honored that Saskatchewan, it just happened to be our turn in the rotation to be the chair of the Council of Ministers of Education for Canada, and so very fortunate to be here with all of you for the last 2 days. I also want to thank CMEC and the officials from CMEC, Chantal Leclerc and her group that provide support to not only me, but also education ministers from across Canada. So our 3 priority areas, the first two are carry forward priorities that we established as Ministers of Education in 2021. So the first is strengthening Indigenous education through pre-service training and ongoing professional learning. This is an area of importance to all Canadian provinces and territories as we strive for truth and reconciliation with our Indigenous people. Education is going to be the key to that, to build that reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Canadians. The second area is implementing the necessary conditions to promote teachers' well-being in the school community. And the third is a new commitment that we are making and that all Canadian education ministers have made a commitment to, and that is strengthening capacity and support for teachers to effectively incorporate digitalization in education to meet the diverse needs of students. So again, it's an honor to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Canada. And next is China.
Okay, thank you. In China, in history, the Chinese people have a very high respect for the teachers. But now we consider the economics is very important. So in the future, we keep reasoning teachers' income and benefits, and also provide in-service training and development chances for every school teacher. The second, we will carry on the National Digital Standard Framework for Teachers, just made it in the last month, and to share the teachers' innovation in digitalization. The third, we will persist on the national policy of open up, so encourage the teachers to raise their global competence. In this way, we will keep learning from the world. Meanwhile, we'll try to share our experiences with the colleagues in other countries. Thank you.
Thank you, China. And next is the Czech Republic.
Thank you very much. Let me first thank you, host and organizers, for a really splendid conference, and it was not only an official part of it, but also in informal meetings and discussions were really very inspiring. So what we have agreed, we would like to improve and cultivate digital literacy, and especially in areas of disinformation abatement and critical thinking, and also sustainable conditions for digital well-being in classrooms. We would also strive to support deeply novice teachers during the introduction period. It's induction, I'm sorry for typing error, but if you don't make errors, you don't grow up. So that's important. And bringing sustainable supportive system to life. And then third, we would like to enhance support for all educational personnel, and especially school psychologists, educators of pupils and students with special needs, and so on. And to do that by improving their working conditions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Czech Republic. Next is Finland.
Thank you. Finland's commitments concern support for learning, also working conditions of teachers, and to take into account the entire educational pathway. Learning level has decreased and need for support has increased, so we will make sure that every child is given sufficient support as soon as the need is identified. And also we will place greater emphasis on ways to provide more robust support for learning. And also teachers' amount of work has increased, so we will take an active role in influencing the working conditions of teachers in early childhood education and in schools. And also we will make sure that the entire educational pathway from early childhood education and care to higher education is better taken into account when developing the educational system on research-based knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Finland. Next is Germany.
Well, thank you. I first want to say thank you to you all for organizing this Congress and for the hospitality we had the last few days. It was really an outstanding meeting. Thank you very much to you, but also to the teams in the behind. Well, I'm very happy that we are able to agree on three topics. At first, we want to fight together against the shortage of teachers. For example, by working on the increase of the attractiveness and appreciation of the teaching profession in society in general. For example, by creating support structures in schools, which means less administrative tasks, more multi-professional teams. We are waiting for the recommendations of our expert report on teacher recruitment and training, and we are going to discuss on basis of these recommendations in the end of 2023. And we agree, and maybe that's new, that only in cooperation it will be possible to find good solutions for our problems. That's the first topic. The second is on our discussion for global and cultural competence and civic engagement. What we need is not more papers and more theory. We have that all. We need a better implementation of concepts in teacher training for all subjects mentioned, and a better implementation in school programs. Schools, we want to encourage schools to work with non-school partners and to reach out beyond the school into the community. And finally, on the third topic we discussed this morning, we agree that digital technologies support the pedagogical work of teachers. For us, it's the most important thing that equal access and improved learning is guaranteed for all pupils. And we need a systematic involvement of teachers and learners in reviewing and developing new strategies. Thank you very much.
Next is Iceland. Thank you, Germany.
The three topics that we agreed on was to keep on the implementation of a new Prosperity Act. That is a comprehensive act that requires us, among other things, to increase the number of qualified teachers and also other professionals within the school system. For example, speech therapists, social workers, school psychologists, and student counselors to ensure the prosperity and well-being of all children. This is an ongoing implementation that will take a few years and requires all systems to work together to serve the school community. Secondly, to ensure quality service to all schools and schools communities by re-establishing an education and school service agency. And we are also in the process of developing a special act on school services as part of the 2030 education strategy. And thirdly, enhancing continuous professional development by implementing a new competence framework for teachers and school leaders and offering mentoring programs for novice teachers. Thank you.
Thank you, Iceland. And next is Italy.
Let me thank you again, Education International OECD, for this possibility, and U.S. administration and Secretary Cardoso for this fantastic organization. It has been very hard for us. This is our first time where we had very different point of view about the education. We worked very hard in these 2 days with very hard confrontation, more than a negotiation. But at the end, we found at least 3 starting points. Enhancing the teaching profession and restoring teachers' leadership and prestige, spreading the values of our Constitution in schools, which protect the values of freedom and democracy, and increasing the use of new technologies in education, aware of the central role of teachers. Thanks again.
Thank you, Italy, and we are very pleased that you were able to find this common ground here. So thank you. Lithuania?
Thank you. Challenge we face at the moment, it's the shortage of teachers and low image of teacher profession. In Lithuania, we have already implemented a number of actions to tackle this challenge. So, for example, like scholarships related to teacher position, national programs to improve teacher competencies, also easier pathway to join teacher profession from other professions, and other actions. However, we would like to take a stock what has been done and what has been achieved, and to revise our strategy together with our partners in order to reevaluate the effect of our current actions. Also, what is important for us that we all agree that shortage of teachers is a shared responsibility, and different actors, they have a role to play, like teachers' unions, ministry, municipality, schools themselves, and also even parents. And so we would like to establish an advisory committee next to the minister, and to make this assessment, to review our strategy, and to agree on our future actions. And the future actions would focus on 4 major directions. So it's public attitude to teacher profession, working conditions and environment. So we would like to take a look into emotional environment. Also, what is very much important, it's a competitive culture, which is prevalent in Lithuania at the moment. So we would like to also to address this issue. Also, revision of initial teacher training and setting high standards for teachers, and continuous professional development. Thank you.
Thank you, Lithuania. And next is the Netherlands.
Yes, thank you, Secretary Cardona, for organizing this, and EI and OECD. Yeah, so these 3 topics we find important. All the things we discuss at the summit will be part of these discussions as well, but this is more about our educational system and the underlying structures that we're trying to build. So first of all, this new regional capacity building that we're trying to organize, and it's ongoing. So we just started that. And we can report back on that next year. And teacher organizations are working to establish standards, which we talked about, and they should be finished before the next summit. So we can also definitely report back on that. And also, and I think this might be the most important question. So we just started we had this tripartite agreement, and it's sort of like the foundation of a new way of working, and we're making it up as we go along. So we see what kind of lessons we have from that. And I would love to be that also a topic for the summit, because the other systems also struggling with this. So that would be the learning, at least for us, and we can report back on the successes and the failures that we had. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Netherlands and New Zealand.
Kia ora koutou. We came up with three overarching ways that we want to go forward in the next year, and the first one was about making certain that we are talking positively and raising the profile and the status of the teaching profession, and we've got some bullet points up there that show some of the key areas that we think needs to happen, but I'll say that the first and foremost, we need stability for our teaching workforce, so we need to ensure that we have quick settlement of the current collective bargaining negotiations, but all of us have a responsibility to be talking positively around how amazing our teachers are and the role of teachers and how important it is. Our second theme that we are looking at is Mātauranga Māori, our Indigenous knowledge. We want to see that absolutely visible and embedded within everything that we are doing, within our curriculum, within our way of teaching and way of being. And we have a current curriculum refresh that is happening. And we have a whakatauki, a saying in New Zealand that says we have come too far not to go further. We have done too much not to do more. And we absolutely believe that. We're very proud of the progress that we have made in our Indigenous education and our education for our Indigenous people overall. But we know that there's more to do, and we look forward to progressing that over the next wee while. And our third theme is around the digital and the new technologies that we're seeing. We need to find solutions and ways forward around the digital divide, but we also need to develop a shared professional vision on emerging technology and prioritise commitments and challenges. We know that there are a lot of people who are in a lot of government departments that are going off on their own and doing their own way in this area, and we need to come together and make certain that we're on the same pathway. Kia ora koutou.
Thank you, New Zealand. Next is Portugal.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to emphasize the work that we managed to do here together, the Portuguese and the government and the Portuguese unions, especially considering the difficult moment we live in Portugal concerning teacher career issues. So even so, we agreed on 6 topics that you can see there. First of all, enhancing investment in initial, continuous and specialized teacher training. Then reducing levels of bureaucracy in schools, ensuring the predominance of the pedagogical activities of each teacher, strengthening schools' role in promoting citizenship and democracy, integrating debates on democracy in its various aspects into normal school activities, and the last 2, introducing in all teacher training modalities relevant components on digital as well as artificial intelligence as a tool that contributes to the improvement of learning. And finally, using digital technologies to strengthen inclusion, correcting current inequalities, and combating the emergence of new exclusions arising from asymmetric access to digital. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Portugal, and we're glad you were able to come together on these issues. Next is Singapore.
We're going to focus on areas that are very much aligned to this year's themes. First, about supporting our educators, to ensuring that we support the educators and provide training in terms of technology and resources to develop their capacity to teach with technology, to help plan their personal and professional development. We are also refreshing our teacher growth model so that the teachers can learn more about pedagogies that lend themselves to the 21st century competencies development, digital literacy, content, as well as skills related to STEM and environmental sustainability. Using technology to support teachers. It's an area where we're going to harness technology to better support teachers so that they can teach more effectively and streamline the workload of teachers. For example, we are looking at ways to explore and introduce AI-enabled systems to better support our teachers in providing students with feedback, individualized and personalized feedback. The third area we are going to focus on would be on creating more time and space for students to focus on 21st century skills. Okay? we have, over the years, cut down on content. And as we move forward, we are also trying to reduce examinations. So we are removing mid-year exams so that the teachers can focus on developing skills and competencies in our students. Like the minister mentioned, you cannot keep adding on things, right? You must remove some things. And I think this is where we are going to focus, and in ensuring that students have time and space to develop the 21st century competencies. Thank you.
Thank you, Singapore. And next is Slovenia.
Thank you for organizing the summit, where we had the opportunity to exchange many ideas and regard our goals in Slovenia. Of course, we have to have a continuous and systemic cooperation and an ongoing dialogue with social partners in the education area, as well as in preparing the legislation. This was lacking in past years. Then active cooperation between teachers, trade union and ministry in promotion of teacher profession, as well as in implementation of recently agreement on improvement of teacher salaries that we hope that will be a success also in our country. Then the last one is the active involvement of social partners in preparing and implementing activities for promoting teaching profession in the society, which unfortunately is in our country very low for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Slovenia. And next is South Africa.
Thanks to Secretary Cardona and NEA and AFT for hosting the summit, and our co-organizers, EI and OEC. Thank you so much for this informative summit that we have had. In terms of our priority as South Africa, we are going to democratize all our processes as we are having this particular project of integration of our people. And for the first thing is the teacher supply and demand, where we are going to develop a national framework of teacher development, where we'll be focusing on the digitalization whilst not neglecting our historical redress, where we identify the areas of shortage with the focus on the digitalization process. And we will also be focusing on the redesigning of our curriculum, so that we are able to meet the 21st century skills of our teachers and our learners in terms of competencies that are required. And when we are looking at global citizenship, we'll then be continuing on our focus as a country on the priority of social cohesion, citizenship, democracy consolidation, and unity and our integration, because we believe that it's important for us to be a united nation, for us to advance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, South Africa. And next is Sweden.
Thank you. First, I want to thank US, OECD, and EI for this well-organized and interesting conference. Thank you. In Sweden, we will continue our joint efforts and dialogue and introduce new measures with a view to attract and retain highly qualified and certified teacher and school leader. And we will also closely follow developments in the upcoming UN Commission for the Teaching Profession and consider ways of Swedish participation.
Yes, and our second commitment is actually focused on how we can provide quality education for all by improve equity, by strengthening the overall state involvement in the school system, and ensure a more equitable financing model to create better conditions. And
thirdly, Sweden will also continue to work to support schools and teachers in their role as a crucial actor responding to global challenges by, for example, continuing the discussion on the needs for research and professional development in this field. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sweden. Next is Switzerland.
Thank you. Ich werde meine Ausführungen auf Deutsch halten. Wir haben uns auf 3 Punkte reduziert. Es gäbe noch viel mehr zu tun. Der erste ist sicher die Stärkung des Profils des Lehrberufs. Hier möchten wir gemeinsam als Verbände und Bildungsdirektionen eine gemeinsame Strategie fahren, damit wir das Image und den Status des Lehrberufs stärken können. In Sachen gemeinsame Strategie auf nationaler Ebene kann die Schweiz noch sehr viel tun. Das Zweite ist die Erziehung zu globaler und kultureller Kompetenz. Hier müssen die Lehrpersonen den Status von Experten erhalten, damit sie Demokratiekompetenz und politische Bildung wirklich auch vermitteln können. Und vor allem braucht es viel Vertrauen von Seiten der Gesellschaft, dass Lehrerinnen und Lehrer Experten sind und es auch bleiben. Dritter Punkt ist die Nutzung von digitaler Technologie. Dieser Punkt wird nie abgeschlossen sein, da müssen wir uns immer darum kümmern und immer weiterentwickeln. Nebst den entsprechenden Budgets und den entsprechenden Technologien braucht es in den Schulen auch die nötige Zeit, um Know-how zu erwerben und es zu vermitteln. Vielen Dank.
My apologies, Switzerland, for getting the second slide up late. There's something wrong with the clicker. But let us turn to Ukraine next.
Thank you very much. First of all, I wanted to thank the Secretary and all chair for this wonderful event and all colleagues. Our commitments for this year and next year, first of all, to enhance the role of teachers in recovery and rebuilding of Ukraine, together as a world community, to prioritize the foundation of the programs for the mental health and mental support and social well-being in education system, both for teachers and students, and to restore the access to education for displaced students and teachers, and to secure the budget expenses on education, guaranteeing decent salaries for teachers aligned with implementing the new instruments for sustainable financial capabilities in education. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ukraine. And next is the United States.
Thank you. We found this time to be very fruitful for us to expand on previous commitments and really strengthen based on conversations we had here. The first is to commit to purposeful collaboration across educational levels and agencies to ensure student well-being and academic success. The key here is to really promote purposeful collaboration at all levels. So while we're doing it here at the federal level, we want to see it in our states, in our local districts, the way we have it here. Second, to promote schools as inclusive community centers, enabling students, families, and educators to thrive through collaboration. Again, schools being the hub of communities, we wanted to strengthen that. The third, as influenced by the conversations today, we took a more nuanced approach. Yes, salary matters, but we want to make sure we're supporting educators as valued professionals, emphasizing collaboration, recruitment, and working conditions, and as was mentioned several times, diversification. So that's an area of focus. We have to involve our teacher preparation programs in this work moving forward, and we look forward to that. The last, collaborating to modernize education so that all students have access. We have career opportunities awaiting them, and we have to align our schools better. And we have to make sure that the system prepares all the students, teachers, and families that they can take advantage of the ever-changing digital technology that furthers learning in appropriate and responsible ways. Thank you.
Thank you very much, United States. And we have one additional country, Costa Rica.
So I really want to thank you for this opportunity, because if you have to report a success story, we're it. Pásame el slide porque se perdió. We didn't put up a slide because 10 minutes ago we didn't know we were going to come to present this agreement, but now we are. So we're very pleased to be here. And just one second because I have to, okay. So we have come to an agreement on two important issues, and I think the dialogue here has helped us to come to this agreement. And Costa Rica has many unions, and so it's a very complex process. The two agreements are, one, we're going to create a temporary special commission on public employment within the framework of the Joint Board of Labor Relations with representatives of the union organizations and the Ministry of Education in order to have a comprehensive approach on the most relevant issues from public employment and global salary for all workers of the public sector, public education sector. And another agreement, wow, we got 2 agreements actually, so anticipating that the current collective agreement soon will expire in March 2024, we, the Ministry of Education, agreed to open dialogue with the union coalition in August 2023, that's 6 months before the expiration of the agreement, with the purpose of renegotiating the terms and conditions of the new collective agreements in order to seek those that promote social peace and the well-being of the workers of the Ministry of Education. So thank you again for providing this space where we were able to come up with this agreement.
Wow, Costa Rica, you're going to be our poster child. So wonderful, wonderful news. And several other countries specifically mentioned that being here helped to be able to come to some of these agreements. So thank you. This was really wonderful to see the range and the breadth, but also in many cases the commonality of challenges here. And we'll be eagerly awaiting next year the progress that has been made in these many, many commitments across your country. So thank you, and best of wishes and luck this year for achieving those things. Next, we're going to turn into our closing remarks. And first, we will hear from David Edwards from Education International.
Thank you, Maureen. First, I would like to thank Secretary Cardona, Maureen, Donna, Montserrat, Sheetal, and the entire staff at the U.S. Department of Education for hosting this year's summit. You have done an amazing job, and we are eternally grateful. I would also like to recognize the great work that our wonderful U.S. member organizations have contributed to this ISTP. I speak on behalf of all EI member leaders present here today when I express our gratitude for hosting us so well, from the Shanker Institute Forum on Education and Democracy at the AFT to the EI briefing and welcome reception at the NEA. So thank you, Becky. Thank you, Randy. Thank you for your solidarity and leadership for making this possible. And I do not doubt that Tony Mackay is watching from home, and I want to thank him for all that he has done to prepare this ISTP as well. We miss you, buddy, and we send you our best wishes. And I would like, yes, for Tony. I would also like to thank Andreas, Cassandra, Rebecca, and the OECD team for being such great partners over these 13 years. These summits are a policy beacon and safe harbor for ideas to be exchanged and debated within an artificial torrent that is marked by increasingly packed global education calendar of irrelevant edubabble fests. ISTP is unique and special because it's real. And obviously, it is really a lot of work. So let me also recognize the hard work and many hours that John, Undra, and the team have dedicated to its success. I'd like to especially do a shout out to John Banks, who is not only, as Maureen said, ISTP's resident historian, but he's also a great friend and a brilliant mind who affably and tirelessly dedicates himself to keeping ISTP real. Thank you, John. This ISTP is rightly tackling 3 of the biggest issues facing us today, and they are all interrelated, conceptually, politically, economically, and existentially. From both the teaching union leaders and ministers of education, we heard the word crisis used repeatedly yesterday in reference to the global teacher shortage. As Susan said in her opening speech, this is a man-made crisis and one that is being felt everywhere in the world. For the first time in 60 years, the UN Secretary General has stopped the normal mode of just describing the problem and listened to the teaching profession's call to reverse the trend. The UN Teachers Commission is gathering evidence around the world to develop recommendations, and I encourage all of you to participate in those consultations to enable the knowledge and wisdom developed in fora like ISTP to inform those recommendations and show why the critical investments must be made to implement them. We heard in Australia, and welcome to your first ISTP, Despite the fact that teaching is the profession that makes all other professions possible, that your teacher shortage has reached crisis levels. But it is really encouraging that you are now developing a national teacher workforce plan. In Finland, we heard that teaching is still a preferred profession with a high level of professional autonomy. Only every 8th applicant to teacher training is accepted. But a decline in funding of education is having a negative impact. And they are experiencing a shortage of ECE teachers, and as you just heard in their commitment, they're going to do something about it. In Sweden, where teachers are the backbone of democracy, they are still facing a massive shortage of qualified teachers. Interestingly, we learned that 60% of teachers who have left the profession in Sweden would be willing to return to the profession if they were more valued by society, had better pay, more autonomy, and reduced administrative tasks. In the Netherlands, we heard that the main challenge is also the teacher shortage, and the government now has an agreement with the unions on how to increase the attractiveness of the profession, and the teachers' unions are leading a process to develop a framework of national professional teaching standards. In New Zealand, as in many jurisdictions, we heard that the workforce is burned out after the pandemic, and they're now running a campaign with a positive narrative about teachers and their well-being. In Iceland, we heard about a breakthrough. They have finally succeeded in increasing the numbers of applicants for teacher training by cooperating with the teachers' unions. It's a novel approach. Ask the people who chose to become teachers why they became teachers, and then build a strategy towards creating, scaling, and sustaining those conditions. And let's be clear, pay does matter. While it may not be the most important factor in every country, I have been traveling the world, and I have witnessed an unprecedented number of industrial conflicts that are highly linked to pay and conditions. Professional pay correlates with professional respect, period. We are privileged and humbled to have the delegation from Ukraine with us. As Katerina soberly pointed out, it is hard to talk about human rights when one's right to exist is under threat. However, our educators are catalysts for the future and for peace. Ukraine should remind us all how fragile our democracies are, and how easily unchecked authoritarians and ethno-nationalists can throw a country into darkness. A country that knows something about coming out of darkness and educating for peace and reconciliation is South Africa. 29 years ago today, Nelson Mandela was elected in that country. And we heard about their work to ensure education systems and teaching move beyond a history of division based on race and language, but are now trying to positively build on the asset of diversity with multicultural and build a multilingual country. Also, like South Africa, who also celebrating a democratic anniversary this week, Portugal reminded us that democracy is something taught and sustained in practice by involving students and teachers in decision-making. It is necessary to democratize schools to move on to the broader issue of democracy for a country. Finland reminded us that it is more important than ever to emphasize citizenship education and media literacy as a transversal more than a subject. This is important because, as some have pointed out, that we're adding to an already packed curriculum, and we must prioritize. The New Zealand delegation reminded us that many Indigenous communities have not had an education which has worked for them, and are focused on a decolonized way of how to teach history. And yes, history did not start when Europeans arrived. Here in the U.S., we heard about the powerful forces working to erode democratic norms by sowing division and disinformation into society. The fear of other is an old weapon that can best be addressed by exposing the deliberate lies at its core. And as Secretary Cardona said, multilingualism is a secret weapon to bridge divides and widen perspectives. And by the way, Secretary Cardona, I sent a video of you playing with Herbie Hancock last night. Without a doubt, you're the best drummer in the Biden cabinet that we've heard so far, as one drummer to another. And my daughter asked coyly whether it was real or an AI mashup. And I assured her that I was there and I taped it myself, but she wanted to check the sources just the same. Our Portuguese friends reminded us that if you think technology will solve your problems, you probably don't understand technology or your problems. And while there seems to be broad consensus on the inevitability of technology continuing to change everything, everywhere, all at once, there was also consensus on the need for teachers to have a say in how it is used and for what purpose. Last year's consensus that technology would never replace the teacher continues. We agree that it must be designed, chosen, and implemented in close collaboration with the profession. It must not continue the horrible strip mining of the time and attention of our young people, the way social media platforms have done so destructively to our democracies. And Randy reminded us of the mental health crisis facing our young people due to social media and the unregulated companies who pursue profit over children's well-being. The Scottish education expert Carol Campbell was quoted, and the quote really rings true. "The future may be more digital, but it absolutely needs to be more human." And this is why Education International looks forward to further developing ethical principles for effective and equitable use of AI with and for teachers in the service of our students with the OECD. You've heard that we are the ones we've been waiting for. In this case, it means we are responsible to mobilize for the progressive use of this technology and hold governments accountable to make this real. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. And next, we will hear from Andreas Schleicher from the OECD.
Thank you so much. And I just want to start by saying this has been an absolutely amazing summit. I want to thank all of you for engaging your time and also your passion and commitment to create a better world through education here. And it is clear that challenges like teacher recruitment and digitalization are tough, but we've seen such an incredible number of policy initiatives around the table here that we should have hoped that actually we can advance the education agenda in this age of accelerations. We began the ISTP with how we can elevate the teaching profession, and we absolutely need to get this right. Now, as Australia put it, the teaching profession is the profession that makes every other profession possible. It is about the key makers, and many countries told us about the significant shortages they face in teachers and that adequate pay is not enough to change those dynamics. But we've also heard from countries like Finland, like China, like Singapore, that actually are remaining quite good at attracting and developing and retaining great teachers. And the high social standing of teachers in those countries is not some, cultural antecedent, but often an outcome of public policy. And what impressed me most, like David, is actually the countries that have been able to change the dynamics for the better. We heard from Iceland, you were able to significantly raise the share of people going into teaching over just a few years, simply by bringing teachers more closely into the center of communities, by listening to their voice, by understanding what makes teaching work for them and what makes it intellectually rewarding. All not rocket science, simple things that we can all do. And it seems so important that we better understand the pull factors that make teaching attractive than getting blinded by the push factors that takes them away. Sweden reminded us that the quality of education can never exceed the quality of teachers. Many people say that, but Spain took that further by adding that the quality of teachers can never exceed the quality of the work environment that we provide in schools. Now, success is about upgrading the infrastructure for continued professional development. We heard that from Sweden, but it's also about interesting career opportunities, challenging career structures, and about greater flexibility for moving in and out of the profession, as we learned from Germany and also from China. The Netherlands and the United States look for ways to reduce non-teaching duties as a way to make the work of teachers more manageable, reduce workload. But, I also want to caution here the tailorization of work organization that we've seen in many countries to optimize teaching time, where teachers only teach and other functions then get outsourced elsewhere, can be as much part of the problem than it can be part of the solutions. If you look at high-performing education systems, be it in East Asia or Northern Europe, the work of teachers is often very intentionally structured so that teachers spend actually a lot of time on things other than teaching, supporting the cognitive, social, and emotional development of students outside formal classroom settings, engaging with parents and communities. Now, we know that every interaction that teachers have with families and their communities is what builds and banks that kind of social capital and fabric. And that is the energy that ultimately fuels the social standing of teachers and ultimately the attractiveness of the teaching profession. Perhaps the most interesting part of this part of the conversation looked beyond working conditions. Italy and Canada spoke about respect for professionalism, respect for professional autonomy, respect for authority of teachers. It is so easy to talk about empowerment of teachers, but Iceland highlighted empowering always means being ready to give away some of the power. And as the Netherlands reminded us, standards and autonomy are always two sides of the same coin. Finland explained to us how Finnish school leaders empower their teachers by trusting them, and in doing so they create that virtuous cycle of innovation and continuous improvement. And in turn, the high level of policy coherence that we see in Finland means that decisions are actually followed through across successive electoral cycles and political administration. That leads Finnish teachers then trusting their education leaders. They trust their integrity and they count on their capacity to actually do what they say. And that's why it is so important to depoliticize education, or as New Zealand put it, not to have teachers caught in the middle of political football. And when New Zealanders talk about football, it gets very serious. And Rebecca, the US Teacher of the Year, showed us how we can meaningfully celebrate teachers and their work. The bottom line is that trust is always intentional. It can always be nurtured through healthy relationships, through constructive transparency. And it is the essential foundation to fuel modern education systems. And we need to get that right. I remember Dustin telling us what wise parents want for their children is what governments should provide and make available to all children. In session 2, we touched on the heart of education, how education become the engine for stronger and more cohesive societies and democracies. It seems if we want to see a different world, we need to work on a different education systems, an education where people learn to live with themselves, where they learn to live with people who are different from them, and where they learn to live with this planet. We began by looking at how school systems can make adequate room for global competence and civic engagement in the school curriculum. Italy, Germany, and South Africa highlighted the importance of remembering and building an understanding for the past as a foundation for the future, and the role of the curriculum to build a deep understanding for the foundations of humanity, for dignity, and how to learn to live with people who are different. The Czech Republic highlighted how important it is to build the teacher voice, not only in the implementation but the design of curricula. But actually very quickly our discussions moved from what we say in the curriculum to how we create the experiences where students can actually live global competency and civic engagement. The example from Austria was interesting. You can lower the voting age to engage young people in democratic processes earlier, but then that creates entirely new demands on young people and education for democracy. And with Ukraine, we have a role model here with us, a country that stands up for freedom and human values, whatever it takes. And Ukraine shows us that human values, motivation and resilience will always win against resources, even if the price for that is so high. Finland reminded us that it's not enough for students to understand the mechanics of democracy, but schools must be places where students can live critical thinking, live active citizenship, live intercultural dialogue, and get along with each other, as you put it. Portugal gave us examples for how schooling can become a whole-of-society project, where schools operate in that broader context that strengthens the way in which we live and practice democracy in schools. I thought this was a really powerful example. And that has a lot to do with how we design environments for learning and how we strengthen teacher capacity and ensure that teachers are culturally aware and informed and can engage with the new civic challenges that teachers face. This is a new world. I'm always impressed when I hear New Zealand talk about this, the way in which you have made cultural diversity and indigenous culture an asset for everyone. It's just very, very powerful. And the way in which you require teachers to
demonstrate growth in cultural knowledge is a great model for professional accountability. Germany and Lithuania highlighted how migration and refugees push our systems to the limit, certainly. But I like the way in which Lithuania sees refugees as an opportunity to develop global competency and civic engagement. As the United States reminded us, the way in which diversity in the teaching force models the communities which schools serve has huge implications for all students, for cultural awareness, for global competency. Spain and Singapore concluded with the very powerful point that we shouldn't see building civic values and teaching academic competencies as opposing ends on a long spectrum that compete for learning time, but again, as two sides of the very same coin. And that teaching global competence is not a matter of the subject you teach, but for how we transmit values through practice and how we convey humility and curiosity, as you put it. And all of this is so critically important. Wherever we don't build a strong floor under the feet of people, the next generation, that's where we see them building walls around them, however self-defeating that's going to be. In our final session, we looked at how we can leverage technology to make learning more engaging, more relevant, more inclusive. And that's really, as you put it, Secretary Cardona, about continually rebalancing opportunities, guidelines, guardrails, as technology advances. The pandemic has helped us see some of the opportunities of digitalization, but it also brought home how technology can just dramatically amplify social disadvantage if we are just bystanders. And perhaps most importantly, it made us understand that the future in education is not about humans versus technologies, but about humans with technology. The pandemic made us also understand that education is not a transactional business, but always a human, a relational experience, and that it has dramatically elevated the role of teachers, not diminished it. But as Slovenia pointed out, technology will change that role of teachers, and we need to get ahead of that curve. Australia reminded us that digital access still remains a major issue, and clearly the consequences of a lack of access are becoming more serious every day. And as New Zealand said here, it requires a whole-of-government response. We can't leave this to chance. And that's where the guardrails come in. And developing guardrails is actually nothing new to humanity. Soon after we invented the car, we figured out that it was a good idea to, put seatbelts and to road signs and maybe speed limits. So let's get started with this and not be paralyzed by the next iteration of technology. And it was good actually to see Sweden making a head start with a national framework on this. Italy told us how important it is to make the algorithms underpinning learning technology transparent. And the Netherlands called on us to develop standards for technology as an enabler for professional autonomy. As I mentioned already, at the international level, OECD and EI will support you with frameworks and guidelines that support transparent, explainable, bias-free and socially negotiated digital solutions. As Finland said, and I think we all feel that sentiment, where we do not engage teachers proactively in the design and piloting of digital solutions. Digital solutions won't be at the service of pedagogy, won't be at the service of learning, won't be at the service of students. So we need to invest in teacher capacity so that the profession can actively engage to co-create smart, user-friendly, open, interoperable, and most importantly, pedagogically, meaningfully digital tools. And personally, I view this as the area where social partnership, profound collaboration between public policy and the profession could be the most decisive force for the future of education. And why all of this is important, Singapore made perhaps the most crucial point. All this is not about digitizing the analog, but about transforming the ways in which we learn and teach, and about giving people greater ownership over what they learn and how they learn and where they learn and when in their lives they're going to upskill and reskill. And if we believe, the challenges of digitalization are unsurmountable, remember our friends from Ukraine. For them, technologies become a lifeline, and they are reimagining education in the middle of fighting a war for our values of democracy and freedom. So the biggest takeaway from the ISTP for me is this. Every industrial, every professional conflict between government and unions has an answer, and not just an abstract answer. You look around the room here, you can always find a country where governments and unions have worked that issue out successfully. And another takeaway for me is that the quality of the relationship between governments and teacher organization is a really powerful determinant for the resilience of education systems and their capacity to respond to challenges and disruptions that we're going to see more and more in front of us. And your commitment to intentional collaboration, Secretary Cardona, is absolutely inspiring for us. So, Secretary Cardona, thank you again for offering us this amazing platform, and Maureen for making it all work. And I also want to thank my colleagues from Education International, Susan, David, and John, for the trustful partnership over so many years. And my special thanks go also to John, who is really the mastermind of all of this, and who told me just that this would be his last summit. The only consolation I have is he told me that for the last 13 years.
Thank you, Andreas. And we'll turn it over now to our host, Secretary Cardona.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. It's truly been an honor to host you in Washington for this 2023 International Summit on the Teaching Profession, and to do so with our international co-hosts at the OECD. Andreas, like I always love hearing you speak, and look forward to your presentations. Always insightful. Thank you. And David, your presentation was very eloquent today, and I appreciate that, and the work of Susan and John as well, the team at EI. I also want to thank the tremendous partners here in the United States, American Federation of Teachers, Randy, CCSSO, Carissa, and NEA, Becky, and their teams. I also want to acknowledge the fact that maybe we take for granted the fact that we can text each other at any point. Really, that for the last 2.5 years, the relationship that we have and the ability to do the way we communicate, it is work. It is work, but when you have that, we know so much more is possible. Doesn't mean we always agree, but it means there's a respect, there's a trust, and there's an understanding of the perspective of the other person, and that's how we grow. So I just want to say thank you. I want to thank the team at the Department of Education. Maureen McLaughlin, you did a great job. I know you've been thinking about this for so long. You know, and yet you'll see my face, you'll hear me, but there's so many people at the Department of Education that have worked so hard to make this possible. I know some of them are in the room. I want to just ask them to please stand to be recognized. The members of the Department of Education, please stand to be recognized. All right. I'm sure there's many more up there. They're as beautifully diverse as our country, which is a source of pride for me. What a privilege it's been to listen and learn from all of you over these last 3 productive and engaging days. In the opening circle, I shared a story about the African gazelle. Well, staying with the African theme, I want to share a little bit about a tribe in Africa, the Maasai tribe, where people greet each other not by saying hello or how are you, but they always start with, and how are the children? It's a greeting that reflects what they recognize as the most important thing, the well-being of our young people. After all, they're our future. Their hopes are our hopes. Their ability to fill their potential builds our communities, strengthens our societies, and shapes our nations. You came to this summit from all over the world, from Canada to Costa Rica, Portugal, South Africa, Finland, to China, and yes, Ukraine. Really fills my heart to be in the same room with you and to hear from you. I'm inspired. I'm inspired by your tenacity and the recognition that through your children you're rebuilding, and that caring for your children, caring for your educators is what you're representing here, but also what you strive to do there. And I was also impressed with the number of countries that spoke about how it's their responsibility to support the children of Ukraine and make sure that we're in this together. I'm just, that for me, that's a takeaway that I wasn't expecting, but let me tell you, it hit home for me. You all came with different needs, different perspectives, different experiences. Whatever the topic, whether we said it explicitly or not, what I heard was an unrelenting focus on what matters most. How are the children? How do we need to support our students? How will our actions affect young people? We saw that focus on our children when we discussed elevating and enhancing the teaching profession. It was clear that we all recognize how critical high-quality educators are for our children. And it is our children who benefit the most when we reimagine how we recruit and retain educators, and when we give them the respect and support that they deserve. We also saw that focus when we talked about education for global and cultural competence and civic engagement. We understood that our young people benefit when they have the skills and pathways to engage with the world and one day secure rewarding careers. And we recognize that the critical thinking and complex problem solving our children develop in the process can serve them well throughout their lives. And we saw that focus when we engage on leveraging digital technologies to ensure equitable access and enhance learning for all. We recognize that education systems have to meet students where they are in an increasingly digital world. And we noted the ways that the world can both open up opportunities for our young people, but also deepen the inequities and dangers they already face. And finally, we saw that focus in the many incredible ways your countries are already raising the bar, or have committed to doing so today. I am very, very inspired by the progress I saw in some teams that are not yet functioning where they want to function. As an educator, as a father, as a leader, I took pride in knowing that at this conference, teams were working that struggle out. We've all been there. And to me, this is what this is about. I'm glad that some teams are leaving a little bit stronger than they were before, but with the recognition that there's still ways to go. Should these conferences not be what that's about, where countries could help other countries understand, yes, there's a lot of tug and pulling, but there's greener pastures when you get there. And that intentional collaboration is not pretty, it's not easy, but it's good for kids, and it's worth doing. I felt to some degree that some of the countries that were open with us and vulnerable with us were the ones that were teaching us the importance of maintaining that intentional collaboration. And maybe they saw in some of us models of what they want to see next for their countries. Isn't that what this is about? So I want to thank those countries in particular who've identified that they have work to do, but we've all been there. And that's the true work of leadership. To find common ground and not focus on what's different. Not focus on what you don't agree on, but find common ground, what's good for kids. Success begets success. Thank you for your vulnerability and for your work. Commit in your commitment to each other. Today, the United States is proud to make some commitments of our own. I'm not going to repeat them. You heard them before in 90 seconds or less, right? We made great progress this week. I want to say thank you for that. And I'm proud of what we've done to follow in the great tradition of these summits and, as I put it earlier, collaborate intentionally. I firmly believe that our children, our young people will be better off because we collaborate intentionally, as governments, as unions, as education leaders. So when we come back together next year for the summit, and we ask the question, how are the children doing? It's my hope that we'll be able to say our children are doing well because we followed through on the commitment to lift the teaching profession. We'll say that our children have a brighter future because we delivered on our pledge to leverage technology for acceleration. And our children are unlocking their full potential because we invited additional partners to collaborate intentionally with educators, because indeed it takes a village to raise a child. And when we return for the next summit, it'll be our privilege to do so with Singapore as our host. For years, Singapore has been a model for making education the top priority it should be in any country. I'm looking forward to Singapore's leadership and example. So thank you very much again for joining us in Washington today. We came together and collaborated and celebrated intentionally. We braided our strengths together. We pushed to reimagine education for the better, and we raised the bar for our children, for our countries, and for our world. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And now, as we come to the close of the 2023 International Summit on the Teaching Profession, we turn to Minister Chan, the Singaporean Minister of Education, who will be hosting next year.
Thank you, Maureen. First, let me, on behalf of the Singapore delegation, thank our U.S. host for your kind hospitality and generosity of spirit and time. And I'd also like to thank all our partners who have given us much food for thought. We have learned much from you and your sharing, and we look forward to hosting you in Singapore next year. We'll send out the details as soon as we can after discussion with EI and OECD, but tentatively, we hope to lock in your dates for the last week of April 2024. That's where we intend to host ISTP 2024 in Singapore. And if you have any suggestions that you would like on the topics to discuss, please let us know. But tentatively, we are looking at a 3-day program where we spend 3 days on 3 different themes. The first day on the new challenges, new competencies required, and the new pedagogies necessary to support our attainment of these new competencies for our children. On the second day, we'll also like to discuss the issues of technology, or rather continue the discussion on the issues of technology and vocational training. And on the last day, for a slightly different flavor, we thought it would be interesting for us to discuss learning and education beyond school. Because in Singapore, we believe that it is not possible for us to front load all the education within the first 15 years of their time in school. But more importantly, how do we keep learning throughout life? So beyond the first 15 years in school, the next 50 years beyond school will be of critical importance to us. And in Singapore, we have always said that to educate a cohort of 40,000 a year is one set of challenge. To reskill and upskill 400,000 every year is a different order of challenge. But we hope to also hear your views and learn from you in these areas. And if there's any other things that you'd like to see in Singapore, to experience in Singapore, do let us know, and we will try to weave it into the program as much as we can so that we can all have a meaningful and purposeful ISTP 2024. So on that note, we look forward to hosting you all in Singapore, and thank you very much. Finally, I must say one thing. The US has indeed set a high bar. We will try our very best to reach up to the standards that the US have set, with one exception. The minister will not play any musical instrument nor sing the next year. Thank you very much. That is too high a bar for us.
Thank you, Minister Chen. We very much look forward to Singapore hosting in the future. And thank you from the bottom of my heart to all of you around the table, to all of the delegations, for being here in such a spirit of positiveness, of rolling up your sleeves, of working for, as the Secretary said, all of our young people, and to support the teaching profession in doing that. So thank you very, very much. Safe travels home, and we hope you get a chance to enjoy a little bit more of Washington, D.C. before you leave, and see you in Singapore next year. Thank you.